The Epstein files are totally destabilizing. Even Pam Bondi said if she released all the information of the Epstein files, the entire government would collapse. And that's the Attorney General speaking. People don't understand the depth of which this really is a prison planet. It's not like a metaphor or analogy. It's a literal prison planet run by using very advanced psychological techniques. He was killed. And how he was killed is very simple.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Watch Mojo's Unveiled podcast. I'm your host, Rob. And before we jump into today's episode, I'd just like to remind you that Unveiled is available on all audio streaming platforms. So you can listen to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. And if you could take a moment to leave us a rating and a review, that would really help us out to keep climbing in the charts and keep being able to bring you great engaging conversations with our guests. And speaking of which, my guest today is a friend of the show, Dr. Courtney Brown, mathematician, social scientist, and founder of the Farsight Institute. He's joining us again to discuss something that's a little bit of a departure from the typical UAP topics that we normally discuss on the show, but I guess you could call it another branch of disclosure of sorts. We'll be going deep into Jeffrey Epstein, the Epstein Files, and the projects that Farsight has been doing on the Epstein case. Dr. Brown, welcome back to the show.
Hey, this is really great to be here, Rob. Thanks.
Always a pleasure. So for anybody who maybe hasn't listened to our previous conversations or isn't too aware of what Farsight is, could we just start by doing a very brief overview of remote viewing and its application, what you guys have done as far as studying Jeffrey Epstein's case at Farsight?
Great. Okay, so I'm the CEO of Farsight. And Farsight is the only major venue that exists anywhere on the planet where full public projects of remote viewing conducted under pure scientific, clean, credible conditions, under totally blind conditions, are available to see. That means that if you do a Google search for remote viewing, or if you do a YouTube search for remote viewing, you'll see a zillion sites and things like that, but there's no major public projects at all. What we do is we are shadow banned by both Google and YouTube because of the content that we have. And that means if you do a search for remote viewing on either one, you won't find us. But if you do a search for Farsight, Farsight, you will find us. But the very fact that we're the only remote viewing group that's shadow banned completely tells you you're not getting any good information from just a Google search or from a YouTube search. If you just click on remote viewing, you've got to include us. And again, anything you're getting is just basically junk because we're the ones that they want you not to see.
Okay.
Remote viewing is a mental procedure that was developed by the United States military and used for espionage purposes. We are a civilian group. We are the largest, biggest, only major venue where you can get full public projects of remote viewing. We use procedures that are derivative of those that were developed by the U.S. military. They're very much advanced. They're more advanced and much more complicated and much more detailed than the ones that the military was using. But it's the ones that we do. We call it scientific remote viewing, SRV. But the real thing is that we show you everything. We show you the data collected under totally blind conditions while it's being collected on video, meaning the remote viewers that we work have been trained for a great many years. They're professionals. This is all they do for a living. And they do all of their work totally blind, including their video presentations, and they don't know the target. They don't know anything. All they were told is there's a target, remote view it, and if you don't do that, we don't pay you. So that's it. They don't know anything else. The level of scientific validity for us is unquestioned. We have all of the transcripts for all of our major projects, and most of everything we've done, up available on our normal website, farsight.org. And in what we call the vault. And those are data sets. Those are every single word spoken by any viewer under totally blind conditions are in those data sets. So no one can say we don't offer ourselves for scientific investigation. All those transcripts are perceptual data sets that can be analyzed specifically by AI. They also have statistics for the validity and accuracy for all of those things. And the accuracy is way off the charts. So anybody who looks and knows what they're doing knows that this is the real McCoy. This is the real thing. So that's what we do. And the reason I'm making a push for this is because all of our projects are available on video in our streaming service, farsightprime.com. Farsight, we can't show everything on YouTube. They shadow ban us. So we can't get this stuff in front of people's faces. We have our own streaming service where there's no censorship. There is nothing. We show everything. It's technically the equivalent of Hulu, Netflix, Disney, Paramount Plus. It's run by Vimeo. It's perfect in every way. All projects are streamed with captions in 13 languages, so anybody in any place of the world can see it and understand what we're doing. So that's basically what it is. And what you're seeing is actual remote viewing being done under totally blind conditions and very theatrically presented. So they're interesting to watch. And yes, we have done stuff on Epstein a lot. And we have done stuff on UFOs a lot, the UAPs a lot. But I have to make one modification for what you said. It's not really a departure. There's a huge connection between Epstein and the whole UFO UAP thing. And I'll explain that when you want me to explain that. Is that enough? Oh, by the way, I am a professor at a major university in a social science program where I teach stats and math and mathematical modeling, and also cool things like occasionally like science fiction and politics, elections and voting. But I do not do my remote viewing stuff that we do at Farsight at my university. They're totally separate realms. Okay. So Rob, is that good enough?
Yeah, that's a perfect introduction. Great context to get everybody up to speed. Let's dig into the Epstein stuff. So the first project that I pulled off of the vault that you mentioned from farsight.org was on Epstein's death. And I know that's not the most recent project that you've done, but that's the one that I started with. And I did run it through Gemini just to see what the major points were. Can you take us through that project a little bit and talk about what the findings were? You mentioned that I believe there were 4 people from your team who remote viewed the same event, which was Epstein's death. But at the time, they did not know what they were looking at, and they all brought back very similar results. Is that correct?
That's part of the statistical evaluations that you can get in the vault. The idea is that the probability of 4 independent people getting the same results, not knowing anything about the target in advance, and getting the same thing is impossibly small. It's the normal alpha level of a test on a statistical basis is 0.05, meaning the probability of that being just random chance should be less than 0.05. 0.05 is accepted across all major scientific disciplines as the number that they accept, saying if you have a probability of something happening less than 0.05 is probably real. The probability of our remote viewers having the same information across all 4 remote viewers is infinitesimal, way smaller than 0.05. It's like many decimals in front of that. So I mean, many zeros after the decimal. So the point is, statistically, it's extremely strong evidence that these remote viewing data are accurate because it's impossible for people to come up with the exact same thing. They have to, unless they're actually looking at the exact same thing. So this is what we know about the Epstein death. Do you want to hear that?
Yes.
Okay. All remote viewers basically have the same thing. We did the project twice. Many years ago, long ago, we did it. And it looked like it was a suicide. Then we did it again because I said, this is something weird. We have to check because advanced extraterrestrials can send remote viewers off. But we have anti-blocking techniques that allow that to happen, that stop that from happening. We didn't use them in the early stuff, and we came up with suicide stuff. And I said, we really should have done the anti-blocking stuff for that. But I said it was just a criminal case, a human criminal case. What incentive would the ETs have been involved in, and the U.S. intelligence services, which do use remote viewing to this day, they can do the anti-blocking, but they wouldn't be concerned about a pedophile criminal in a prison. Why would they do that? So I said, and then after a while, I said, that was wrong. I should have used the anti-blocking techniques. So we did the whole project over again, and everything came out different.
Okay.
And that told you 2 things. This thing was of such high priority that authorities, intelligence services, even extraterrestrial help, was adamant about not letting us see that the first time. So the fact that we ran into blocking the first time, and then when we did the anti-blocking stuff, it was all washed out and we got the correct stuff. I said, holy Moses, this is way bigger than what I was thinking. This isn't just one crazy pedophile in a prison who killed himself. For the intelligence services to have gotten involved in setting up anti-blocking techniques is a big deal. They don't have the resources to do that casually. So it had to be a huge deal. Same with the extraterrestrials. It had to be a big deal. So we did that. And that's when we got the real results under totally blind, totally squeaky clean conditions with everybody matching exactly. He was killed. And how he was killed is very simple. When you have an assassination that takes place in a prison, you bring prisoners in to the cell. First of all, any person that's inside the cell with the person you want to kill gets moved out. And that's what happened. They moved out his cellmate the day before. And then you have other prisoners moved into the cell block that are the assassins. And they are given keys. They're given keys to their cell, and they're given keys to Jeffrey Epstein's cell. And so they get in. So there's nothing to be seeing where you see somebody on a camera walking in through the building and getting in. They are in there already, and they have the keys. And then at a certain time, and from people on the inside, the cameras get shut off. And at that time, the keys get pulled out, and the three assassins walk out of their cell, a few cells down, open up the cell for Jeffrey Epstein. By the way, this is exactly what we saw in this. Open up the cell for Jeffrey Epstein. It only lasted a few minutes. They roughed him up. There was a fight. There was a scuffle and stuff like that. There was a bit of talking, but not much. And he was pleading and everything like that. And they killed him. And then they strung him up to make it look like he hung himself. And then they walked out and they go back into their cell and lock everything on the way out. So Jeffrey Epstein's cell is locked and their cell is locked. They wait a couple days. And then they're transferred out of the cell and then released. That's what happens. That's how you kill somebody in a cell block. This is, by the way, standard operating procedure for killing anybody. But we had to see it before we realized, oh, so that's what happened. And then I found out that was standard operating procedure for how people get killed inside. And then the other thing is, now that we're seeing everything that Jeffrey Epstein did, there was no way in the world they were going to let him live. Absolutely impossible. They were not going to. He had so much information. That was a huge blackmail operation that was being conducted internationally. And there was no way in the world they were going to let him survive. This had to happen. But we didn't know that when we first did it. We naively just had a few remote viewers look at it. But when we redid it, we saw a whole bunch of things. We saw how important it was. We saw that resources inside U.S. intelligence as well as extraterrestrial had operated to really put in blocking stuff for remote viewing. We use that routinely now with all of our stuff, but it's and there's no known way around it. No one can stop us when we go in. No extraterrestrials can stop. Nothing can stop. But we didn't used to use it all the time in the old days, but nowadays everything's so sensitive and we're at such a high level of visibility that, we have to use it.
I'm curious as to how that works, the anti-blocking technique.
Oh, sure.
Is that a meditative technique?
No, we can't do it on ourselves. We have help from a group of extraterrestrials who we call the good ETs. And they said it, we've been interacting with them. Actually, we have meetings with them. We'll be publishing in a boardroom meeting with them and later on today, in fact. We actually have meetings in our boardroom right over there, and two of them typically show up, and we talk. This has been going on for years, and at their insistence, they require us to video record everything. We have lots of meetings with them down at the beach, various places, in secret locations in the middle of the night. It's been going on for years and years, and they want absolutely no secrecy. Absolutely no secrecy. They want this old idea that you get from sometimes in the channeling community. You're almost ready for disclosure. You're almost there. Just a little bit longer. That's bull. That's crap. Nothing that is true. People, that's what we call the bad ETs, just kicking the can down the road. They're trying to manipulate the human population, and the channels, who are beautiful people, totally honest, are hardworking. They're being conned, and they don't know it because they're opening their bodies up, their minds up to be used by somebody. And the bad ETs are hijacking it and spreading and using it for spreading information, which is very successful and very, very useful. And the information that comes out of the channeling community seeps into the rest of society through movies and other things like that. It seeps in. It's not contained just that. So you really have a whole planetary population that believes that crap, that we're almost ready. But it's a prison system that we have. So what we have with the anti-blocking techniques is we have our side. They have ways of getting around the anti-blocking, the blocking stuff. They have ways. They have tech that has a way of getting around it, and they have advanced extraterrestrials that have stronger mental connections that can see it. They can see through anything. Now, even the bad ETs have that same technology to be able to see through it. So among the extraterrestrials, there are no secrets. Everybody can see everything else. Excuse me. So among the extraterrestrials, there are no secrets. So what happens is when we do a session and we use the anti-blocking techniques, we connect up with the good ETs. Typically, we think of it as a guy, male or female, but there's a person, and they're hooked up to be able to see anything. And we ride their consciousness. We ride through their consciousness like a carrier wave into the target. So we cannot do it by ourselves. So don't think of us as being superhuman, special meditative techniques. We can't get through that. We cannot get through the blocking stuff by ourselves. We have to actually ride a different consciousness like a carrier wave into the target. And it's because those people, those ETs cannot be blocked because they have technology and stuff like that does it. It's because of that we can get through anything. But without their help, we can't get through this stuff. But when we use the blocking techniques, it's foolproof. And nobody can stop us.
Okay, and just the fact that there is blocking being enacted suggests involvement from other ETs. So this is what I want to get to next, because you said that it isn't really such a departure from the UFO UAP stuff that we've been talking about in previous episodes. There is a connection to Epstein, so I would like to get into that next. Also, with the context that we just heard the White House announced that they're going to be making a move to release the UFO files that they have. And so this is getting everybody excited, but a lot of people are also saying this is clearly a distraction that Trump is employing to get attention away from the Epstein stuff. So I want to know, what's your take? How is this all connected?
Well, there's two things acting currently as a distraction. First of all, the Epstein files are totally destabilizing. Even Pam Bondi said if she released all the information of the Epstein files, the entire government would collapse. And that's the Attorney General speaking. So the Trump is finished as soon as all that Epstein stuff comes out. So he's got to do anything to pivot. But there's two things going on. Obama came out just a few days back and said, yes, there are aliens on a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no follow-up question.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. So
Yeah.
what happened is he must have made an arrangement with the host, the podcast host, to ask that one question, are there aliens? And made an agreement, no follow-up questions. There's no other way, because there's no other way any podcaster would say, holy Moses, you're saying there are aliens? Well, tell us more. What's going on? There's no way that could have happened. But the podcast host just said, great, okay, and moved on. So Obama made a disclosure moment. Trump didn't like it. He came out the next day and was asked about that and said, well, Obama violated a security oath. That's bad. He violated the law. That was he released classified information, which indirectly was a acceptance that what Obama said was true. If it was classified, classified information.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's something else going on. His sons, his two big sons, are totally aware of the UFO stuff. I have seen I forget which son it was. It was anyway. He has his own podcast, and he was interviewing who's the UFO guy on CNN? No, on not CNN. He's the UFO guy on News Nation.
Oh, was Ross Coulthart?
Yeah. He was interviewing Ross Coulthart, and Ross Coulthart was going through the whole stuff, all types of different, all stuff, and there was Trump's son agreeing, and they're talking about this. So the sons know the entire thing, and also they are apparently pressuring their dad to be the historic president that releases the information and becomes the guy that broke it. So the theory that's going around now is that sometime, I think around July, I guess, on the anniversary of the Roswell crash would be a nice time to sort of make that sort of heading happen. And then Obama upstaged him and said aliens are real. So now Trump has to sort of, reconfigure things to be able to get the limelight back. There's that competition going on with that. But in addition, we have what looks like a soon attack on Iran with Israeli and U.S. forces. And that will be a huge distraction if there ever was one. So we've got war as a distraction, and we also have the UFO stuff that's being sort of pushed. The agenda seems to be pushing up. And if you release a couple 100,000 or a couple million UFO documents, then you're competing with a few million Epstein documents.
Right.
And then you get a huge pile of documents that people are thrashing about. And that sort of muddies the whole information pool waters that the media is sort of, grappling with. So that's what's going on now. It's a mess right now, but it looks like there's going to be, by necessity, more Epstein files coming out. We know that only half of the files that they have actually have been released. There's going to be pressure to release more of those. Many of those probably have very damaging information with regard to Donald Trump. I just saw a notice today that he gave a talk somewhere. Again, he'd mentioned that he's probably not going to heaven. so I mean, stuff is probably, but he doesn't want to lose the presidency. And the real kicker is in November, if the elections actually happen. But if the elections happen in November and there's not some major turnaround of major events, the Republicans are going to lose their shirt in the House and the Senate. And if that happens, Donald Trump will be impeached for sure. And he would be tried in the Senate, and he could be facing jail time. So, he's really got to get this thing. He's got to put all of his cards on the table soon. And sort of a maximum date is like August to get all the cards on the table, because after that, it's just campaigning. So, So
that's the situation as it is now. I mean, we already have had millions of files released, and one of the frustrating things is how many names are redacted, how much information is blacked out, and people are wondering, will anybody actually face justice for having participated?
Even when Prince Andrew was arrested and held for like 20 hours or something, he wasn't arrested because of the pedophile stuff. He was arrested because he had sent an email to Epstein that had some classified information, and that was not allowed. That was a violation. So, there's stuff still coming out about him, what he did with Ghislaine Maxwell. There's stuff coming out involving, what he actually did with those kids that's more detailed. And that is, I don't want to go into in this podcast the sort of gruesome details, but they're chilling from what I've heard so far. And I just don't want to go into that. But what I do want to say is we can connect the Epstein stuff to the UAP stuff in a major way so that people will understand it if you tell me to do it.
Yes, please. I'm fascinated to know more about that.
Jeffrey Epstein was a Baal worshiper, Baal. Baal is exactly the same as Zeus, who's exactly the same as Ra. They are still alive to this day. The guy is still alive to this day. He's a ferocious warrior. He succeeds to stay around despite galactic attempts to arrest him because he's such a good warrior. He's such a good, he fights, and he fights ruthlessly, and he has military forces. Those people who are involved with worshiping Ra by going to his channeling sessions and reading the Book of One slavishly, they're just that's a psyops. That's a con thing. What happened is Ra is trying to reinvent history to show himself as a good guy, but it's the same exact personality that raped kids and tortured people way back when. He's just trying to reinvent himself. Not many people know about Baal, but a lot of people know about Zeus. Zeus was a pedophile, and he was considered a god that went around raping underage women.
We're talking about the Greek god Zeus
Yes,
from mythology. This is an entity who exists currently.
Yeah, absolutely. He doesn't die. So he's just nobody dies, but he happens to be in a position of authority. He has ships, and he's a really cunning warrior. He's still in power, and no attempts to actually have him arrested have been successful. So, but Zeus and Baal and Ra are the same exact guy. Jeffrey Epstein he picked the personality flavor of Baal. He was a Baal worshiper. Now, if you just go to Gemini or Google, or if you go to any of your AIs and just say, what is the connection between Jeffrey Epstein and Baal? It'll come back with, no, there's no connection. It's a conspiracy theory that was done, but the temple that was on Jeffrey Epstein on Little St. James, which is the building on Jeffrey Epstein's island, that had nothing to do with Baal architecture. If you look at Baal architecture, it's monolithic stone buildings, and it doesn't look like that at all. So that's what you get. So that's garbage. That's mainstream stuff that's put out there, and the search engines and the AIs are just sort of gathering what's out there and calling it all conspiracy theory. The reality is much different, and this can be confirmed with your AIs, but you have to give it the information so that they know what to look for. So the building on Little St. James is an architectural signature of a specific historical occult lineage. Now, this we're going to call it. Just for the sake of argument, we're going to call this. It's a direct homage to Mamluk Sultanate. That's Mamluk Sultanate, and its deep roots is in ancient Syrian Baal worship. Now, by utilizing the Ablaq, ABLAQ style, it's an architectural style. It's a technique that was originated by the pagan builders of the Syrian Hauran, Hauran. The structure functions as a modern high altar to the slave king archetype in the ancient deity of time and sacrifice. So the architectural code is this. So the most striking feature of the island structure is the alternating blue and white horizontal stripes. Now, what I'm talking about is Jeffrey Epstein's building on the island, Little St. James, okay? So it's got these alternating blue and white horizontal stripes. Now, the technique is this. The technique is known as the ablaq, which is Arabic for party colored. Now, the Mamluk signature is it was perfected by the Mamluks, and that was between 1250 to 1517 AD. Okay, Mamluks, Mamluks, and it was done in Egypt and Syria, and they used it to decorate the facades of mosques, madrasas, and high-status bathhouses to project absolute power. Now, the direct prototype is Haman Yalbugha, Yalbugha, and that's located in Aleppo, Syria, and it was built around 1491. Now, this Mamluk bathhouse is the closest structural match to Epstein's building. It features the exact alternating bands of masonry, the central dome. Epstein's building currently had the dome blown off by a hurricane, but it had a dome, exactly the same type, and a square footprint. So the building, if you look at Epstein's building, it's a square. And and so Epstein's temple is a modern painted replica of this specific Mamluk bathhouse style. The word Mamluk, Mamluk, translates to slave or one who is owned. The Ayyubid Sultanate, that's the Kurdish Islamic dynasty, originally imported these Turkish and Caucasian children as military properties. They owned those kids. They imported children. That was done. The coup that occurred is in 1250. These owned soldiers assassinated the last Ayyubid Sultan and seized the empire. Now, for a figure obsessed with the ownership of humans, Mamluk aesthetic is a psychological signature. It celebrates a class that rose from bondage, restriction, to absolute dominance and authority. So, slavery is part of a process of dominance, and they accept slavery as the thing that they do. Now, the alternating oblak style, the different colors, black and white, was not invented by the Mamluks. It was inherited by the ancient Baal worshippers of southern Syria. The geology of Baal is this. In the Haran region, that's Hauran, is defined by basalt, it's defined by black volcanic basalt and white limestone. That's where you get the black and the white.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the original architects were done. That was centuries before in the Islamic era. The pagan worshippers of Baal shaman and Baal Hadad utilize. That's what they call this. They're different versions of what they saw with Baal. Utilize these contrasting stones to build their temples. The alternating pattern was a sacred masonry code native to the land where Baal was the supreme deity. This exact code that you see in Jeffrey Epstein's building. Now, the Mamluks simply formalized this existing Baal country masonry into the high status oblak, that's ABLAQ, oblak style. And to use the style today is to utilize that visual language physically and historically tied to the sacrificial cults of ancient Syria. Now that I'm getting to the sort of the final end of this thing.
Okay.
The link between the bathhouse, Haman, and the Baal is ritualistic. There's in ancient Syrian cults, ritual washing was the mandatory precursor to entering the presence of Baal. The Haman evolved from the sacred washing pools attached to the pagan temples. Now, Baal Haman, which is the primary Phoenician aspect of Baal, is linked to heat or the glowing one. The Haman part of that, Baal Haman, specifically is the high heat environment of the, I'm sorry, but it's the Yalbuga, Yalbugha, and that mirrors the heat of the bronze altars that are associated with the Baal Haman's sacrificial demands. Now, it's built in Aleppo, the seat of the ancient temple of Hadad, which is Baal. This structure adopts the oblak stone style that you see in Jeffrey Epstein's building as a code of the original Baal worshippers to the signal inherited authority. Okay, now we're at the end. The focus on Baal leads directly to the archetype of what we call Kronos, also known as Saturn. In the ancient world, Baal is syncretized with the Greek Kronos and the Roman Saturn. So there's all these same entities, they're all synced up because the same guy is using multiple personalities to enforce himself. This is hard to get, but this is the bottom line. In mythology, the Kronos / Saturn is the devourer of his own children. Fearing overthrow, he swallowed his offspring at birth. Saturn represents the physical world that consumes everything it creates. It's the context of the island's history, the homage to the deity who maintains power by consuming the next generation. That is the ultimate occult signature. Okay, so this is the slave king legacy. Yalbuga, he was a former slave who became a master. His bathhouse is a monument to the transition from property to proprietor. So let's talk a little bit about masonry as code, because that's what we're seeing in the Epstein building.
Yeah.
The facade that you see on Jeffrey Epstein's building, and the same with the ancient stuff, the facade utilizes alternating stone patterns of the ancient Baal temples of Syria, effectively masking a pagan sacrificial aesthetic as a high-status civic bathhouse. So the Little St. James structure, this is Epstein's building, is a simplified, non-functional mimic of this bathhouse, retaining the boxy footprint, the dome, and the Baal-derived stripes to act as a theatrical mask for its underlying cultic purpose. So the verdict is, the Little St. James structure is a modern reconstruction of a Syrian pagan altar, utilizing the masonry code of ancient Baal worshippers and dedicated to the consuming principle of Saturn. Jeffrey Epstein now. Eating children, bringing children in, devouring children is what they do. That's the entire worship. That's the entire process of what they do. They bring in kids, they torture the kids, and in many times they kill the kids. And basically, that's it. That is really what Jeffrey Epstein is all about. And all those luminaries, all those politicians, they were all involved in the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. And knowingly or unknowingly, they were participating in Baal worship practices. Finally, it was all caught on video, all caught on emails, all caught on pictures. This was also a very highly evolved, advanced intelligence gathering blackmail network. So this was also an intelligence gathering blackmail operation where they were trying to gather as much information as possible from people to compromise them so that they can control them afterwards. That was the key, to be able to control them afterwards. So this obviously was way beyond Jeffrey Epstein. He was just a foot soldier. But to get him to do this stuff, you just can't recruit anybody to do this stuff. He had to be deeply involved, not just as a psycho pedophile. He had to be deeply involved in some type of process that made sense to him. And that was the Baal worship concept. People often say he was Jewish. No, he was a Baal worshiper. He may have claimed to have been Jewish, but he was a Baal worshiper. That's really what was going on. And he adopted all of the typical practices of the Baal worship sacrificial style. And as above, so below. He acted just like Zeus and Ra and Baal, which is to capture, rape, and torture kids.
My question leading off of that is, what does one get out of doing such horrific things?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, they bought into the whole worship thing. The guy at the top, Baal, Zeus, Ra, the guy at the top, he's just controlling the masses. He just does whatever he wants. He's a military guy, formerly a prison warden of the planet. And he just goes around and he likes raping underage kids because that's what he does. But he utilizes the thing as a religion because it's a nice way to control humans. And then some humans mimic him. He does what they do what he does. And so that's where Jeffrey Epstein sort of came into this whole ball of wax. We've done other remote viewing sessions on him, however, on Jeffrey Epstein. and also on Baal, and also on Zeus, and also on Ra. So we have whole projects that you can see on farsightprime.com that go into each one of these general aspects. And one of the things that we've come out with when we look at just the current Epstein stuff, this is projects we haven't yet published, but the remote viewing is done. They're sort of next in the line. So probably sometime next month they'll be released. Is that the Epstein stuff is the tip of the iceberg. And it was way bigger. And that the network, they may have gotten rid of Epstein, but he was just a foot soldier in a paganistic religion cult. The actual cult, the actual organization is still there. And it's tied to Zeus, Baal, Ra. It's still tied to those guys. So that whole organization is still fully functioning and being utilized. So it's all, you have to understand, they connected it also to intelligence networks. And the intelligence networks were interested in getting compromising information on all of these people as a means of controlling them. These luminaries, they didn't go after just common people on the streets. They went after big people. And they got that compromising information, and they were an intelligence organization. I'm not going to point to the country or the intelligence organization, but you can probably put two and two together to figure out what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And now they have a huge collection of compromising information. Now the FBI arrested Epstein and collected all the stuff. You're crazy if you think that copies of absolutely every little thing isn't also in the headquarters of at least one national intelligence organization, meaning Epstein sent everything to an intelligence organization, and absolute copies are there. And you're crazy if you don't think that there's pressure being put on political leaders in the United States to do things, or else. That's what the information was gotten for in the first place.
Right. And so, with all this said, is Epstein just a scapegoat to take all of the heat, like from all of these reveals, and basically so that whoever else is operating these other, you mentioned him just being one point, one node in the network, all the rest of it can remain operational, but he takes all of the heat for everything that is being revealed? That's what happening? Is
Yeah.
that what is happening right now?
Yeah. And he's dead conveniently.
Right.
He's conveniently dead. So they had to kill him. So, he was not going to be allowed to be left alive. They had to kill him. So, but he was somebody that could be relied on. And he bought into this whole worship idea so that he had sort of a philosophy that justified his craziness.
There's also, it's spoken about a transhumanist element to Jeffrey Epstein in the things that he was interested in the sorts of projects that he was involved in. He had this Zorro ranch in New Mexico, which he was supposedly using as a sort of like location to, I guess, conduct genetic experiments and talking about repopulating the human race with everybody with his DNA and things like that. AI works into it too, or he's been in contact with people from the tech industry working on various projects. What is there a transhumanist undertone to all of this?
Absolutely. You have to also understand 3 million emails have been released and another 3 million have not been released. Who in the world has the ability to write 6 million emails? So this was obviously not just Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
Nobody can write 6 million emails. So there's a huge thing like that. Yeah, Jeffrey Epstein was connected with a lot of people that had scientific information as well, and he was getting that information, and he was fundamentally concerned about. He was also aware of the extraterrestrial type of influence through this Baal worship thing. And they use tech. ETs use tech for everything. And so it's natural for Jeffrey Epstein to be thinking transhumanist. He was very concerned, apparently, you can investigate this yourself, but apparently I've heard that his testosterone level, believe it or not, was extremely low, like 150, really low. And he was very upset about that. And apparently he was investigating ways that it could be some type of modification could be done to him to help that. So he used to apparently investigate research on black athletes, thinking that he could figure out what's going on and geneticists could do something and sort of fix his low testosterone level. So he was able, because of his pathology of being a pedophile, psychologically, he was able to get aroused with kids, but he had a very low testosterone level. So he was not attracted to, like, adult girls and things like that. It was a psychological warping that was in his head. But he was interested in transhumanist stuff and blood stuff, and part of it was the torture stuff. I guess I might as well mention that.
Let's not leave anything, in the shadows. I mean, like,
Yeah.
this stuff should be spoken about. So,
Okay.
monetization be damned to a certain degree. Let's lay it all out.
There was a reason why he was so interested in torture. And this, I'm not going to mention any names,
Mhm.
but this has been a phenomenon that has spread through a lot of human elite. A few years back, Interpol discovered a series spread throughout Europe of, what do they call those? The containers that go on top of big trucks,
Yeah.
the container pods.
Shipping containers. Yeah.
Yeah. They were set around in various places in Europe. And inside the containers were tortured. Everything was torture. They had like a dentist chair where a person would be strapped in. Everything was pristine, like a surgery place. Everything was perfectly white. They had all torture tools, lopers for cutting off fingers. The person would be strapped down. Everything was soundproof. No sound could get out. And it was all the tools and techniques for the most grotesque torture chamber you can imagine. And it wasn't one of them. There was a bunch of them spread throughout Europe and Interpol. And it made the news briefly for a while that they discovered this and shut down those things. But obviously those things were put together with a lot of money and a lot of interest in getting that stuff done. What it is it's not just a bunch of stupid people and bad people that want to torture people because that's what they get their rocks off on. They have a belief system. And the belief system is that when they're in the presence of people being extremely tortured, the psychology of the person fragments. And when you're in the proximity of those people, psychic effects start to happen, including being able to see certain ETs. So there's something that mentally happens. Now, this is very important with respect to the remote viewing stuff that we do, because all the projects that you see us doing, hundreds of them that you see on farsightprime.com, that was done using psychic methods, psi methods that were developed over decades the hard way, slowly training the mind to be able to do this kind of stuff. That's the hard way. Years of work, years of refinement, meditation, learning how to do the procedures, learning how to perceive these things. The fast way to do it is to be right next to someone who's being tortured and personality fragmented, and you get psychological psychic effects. So they've also discovered that the blood of people that are being tortured produces some chemicals. People sometimes refer to as adrenochrome or something, but it produces some chemicals that can produce a high. Now, actually, there are extraterrestrials that do that on purpose and consume that. And it has gotten into the human population, especially in the elite situations. And there are people that actually do torture and basically eat babies, eat people that are being tortured. And, it's really not in dispute. They've actually found a whole bunch of these torture chambers around Europe. Somebody had to build those blankety blank things, and they had money. What they do with it, and they had all the techniques, all the tools, everything, the strapping chairs, the soundproofing. These were not done on a. This is not some wild guy taking somebody to a cave in the woods. This is official mainstream processing of torture, and that is what Jeffrey Epstein did. he was involved in the torture of kids. Now, I have to say one more thing. Not all, but within intelligence services, I won't even mention the countries, but within intelligence services, there are branches, small branches, that have discovered this and utilize it and capture people and split their personalities. They do it for a variety of reasons, and they have to do it with torture. Their personalities become split, so they have multiple personalities. And part of the reason they do this is because they can send those people out as agents to do all types of things. And they don't have to worry about them being captured because one personality will not remember what the other personality says. So it's like is blocked off memory. And they learned how to do this from the damn extraterrestrials, what we call the bad ETs, who know how to do this. And so that's part of why the torture actually happens. So you have to understand, it's not torture because the people are just bad and they're getting the rocks off because they like torturing people. No, they're not just sadists. There's a belief system, there's a religion, and there is an overall intelligence sort of benefit that they
Practical
see,
use that they actually
a
get.
practical use of that type of thing. And then a lot of the elites have been caught up into this when they consume in some way, shape, or form some of these chemicals. They experience the high, they experience the psychological effects. They experience the rush. And unlike you and me, they never actually ask, what if it was the reverse and I was the one being tortured? Would I want to be that? They don't empathize because and to get rid of the empathy, they have to embrace the whole philosophy of the thing. It's not just cruelty, it's a way of existence that's got a philosophy, a religion, a belief system. That's how come it was able to spread through so many people and across so much of the leadership on this planet.
Yeah, this is all incredibly upsetting to discuss. There's other layers too. I feel, and I know from our previous conversations that we've had, and you even referred at the beginning of this conversation about the prison planet AI control system that governs Earth, governs humanity. What's the connection via Epstein to that system?
The ETs that are dominant on this planet right now are what we call the bad ETs. And they are reptilian. They're also all the people that are associated with humanoid types that look like Zeus, Ra, Baal, whatever name you want to call it. We just released a project that you can see on farsightprime.com of Baal versus Yam. Yam was another ET figure who was opposed to Baal and didn't want all this stuff to keep on going. And they had a big battle and stuff like that. And we released that project, Baal versus Yam. It's fascinating. People should really watch it. They should watch all of the stuff on farsightprime.com. You don't get it anywhere else. And you're not getting anything useful out of the major mainstream news, CNN, BBC, things like that. It's just, you're not getting any of this stuff. So there's no way you can get this information except for farsightprime.com. Farsightprime.com was developed by us in cooperation with the good ETs, the ETs that we work with. And the only reason we exist today is because of their protection. We also have the protection of somebody in the U.S. military. The military is not monolithic. It's separate, it's fragmented. And a section of the military, hopefully a large section, has kept us alive as well. They could snuff us out in a heartbeat. So it's the combination of, we get extraterrestrial protection from what we call the good ETs. Somebody in the military is helping out. And then we have our opponents, which are the bad ETs, who would like us to be wiped off the planet Earth, and the human collaborators with them. This all goes back to, in recent times, the written signed agreements that were made between the bad ETs and the U.S. government, the Israeli government, a few other governments. Now, this is not in dispute. If you Google Haim Ashed. He was the former director of the Israeli Space Directorate for 30 years, a decorated general and now a college professor. He gave an interview in the Hebrew language that he thought was going to be safe because he said, it's just in the Hebrew language in Israel. But it turned out lots of people know Hebrew, and it was immediately translated into every language on the earth. He explicitly said that these written agreements exist between the U.S. government and the group of ETs and so on. And he went on to sort of defend agreements and so on. But basically, in exchange for technology that's reverse engineered from crashed ET ships, that group of extraterrestrials are allowed to operate, and they're basically running the prison. And they got a free will decision from the U.S. government to operate here. Now, the good ETs are free will absolutists, and so they're stuck. There was a free will agreement. They were willing to cooperate with the United States government as well, but they weren't going to give weapons transfer. The U.S. government wanted weapons transfer. So that was where the schism originally happened. The good ETs have a plan that they're involved with right now to overthrow the entire system, but they need a free will agreement. So it's got to be a free will agreement from the masses, since the elite have been totally compromised. You can look at the Epstein files. Even Pam Bondi said if she released everything in the Epstein files, the entire government would collapse. So the entire system has been compromised. So the free will agreement that the good ETs are looking for is from the masses. And that's a whole nother story we can go into on another time. But all the crises that you see happening over the world, that's all part of this plan to sort of bring about a collapse of the information control system that's stopping people from seeing what's really going on, and then finally allowing the truth to come out. Farsightprime.com is their venue, the ET venue for having humans capture all the truth, the real stuff that happened, the real history of this planet, and offer it as a library that people can read and see and watch in live. And we pivoted now into making all of our projects really entertaining with high levels of animation and graphics and stuff like that. So it's very entertaining to watch our stuff, as well as it's educational. But yeah.
It's very interesting. The more that this information comes out and it gets kind of absorbed by the public, the more that I feel like the more credibility is given to people like yourself who've been speaking about these things for ages, and other people like I've been seeing. It's time to apologize to David Icke for making fun of him about talking about the reptilians and things like that, and all of his things that he's been speaking about for years. All of this stuff seems now much more easy to accept and digest in a kind of horrible way.
In a horrible way.
Yeah, but looking ahead, so now we have had this declaration by Donald Trump that the Department of War will go ahead with releasing documents about UFOs and UAPs.
Yeah, no, they're not going to release they're not going to tell you everything that you get at farsightprime.com, but they'll release something.
They'll release something, which is what I expect. I don't really presume that we'll get everything, but where do you see this heading? Because there's undoubtedly a lot of excitement happening online about this. I think people are getting a bit ahead of themselves because who knows what actually will happen. Where do you see this heading this year? Also, because we have a huge Steven Spielberg film coming out this summer called Disclosure Day, which the timing seems a little bit odd for that. Like, people are talking about this being a gigantic psyop. I know that you have spoken about things like that too. Is that what we're seeing? Like, how can you make heads or tails and know what's actually true of all this ET stuff that's being seemingly divulged or about to be?
This is all part of a desperate attempt by the powers that be, who are losing traction with the masses, to regain and keep the traction of the masses so that they can still stay in power. You've got all the Epstein stuff coming out. You've got the complete discreditation of all of the major leadership worldwide, not just in the United States. And you get the real possibility that the elite can lose everything. And so what you have now is the beginning of the disclosure thing, is partially as a distraction to get away from the other damaging information. But you also have wars coming out. And the wars are very difficult to predict right now, but it doesn't look particularly good. And also, if, for example, the United States and Israel do attack Iran, the Iranians know that it's an attempt at a kill shot. It's an attempt to regime change. They want to break up Iran. And the Iranians are going to respond, and they've already stated they're going to respond. And they can respond by attacking aircraft carriers, but they can also respond in the United States. This much we know for certain. During the 4 Obama and Harris years, they had a complete open border, and 14 million people walked to the borders with no vetting whatsoever. In addition, there were 18-wheelers, big trucks of stuff coming through that were completely just came in through, carrying drugs from the cartels, but also carrying weapons. And it's absolutely stupid for anyone to say, oh, the Iranians wouldn't have taken advantage of that and put in some sleeper cells. Al Qaeda wouldn't have taken advantage of that. No, they wouldn't. ISIS wouldn't have done that. No, they wouldn't. So during that time, enemies of the United States, including the Iranians, certainly moved in with lots of sleeper cell people. They're not stupid. And they're not the ones that are trying to work for a living and getting caught by ICE. They're sleeper cells. They're hiding places, and they have heavy weaponry, including missiles. So if you have a war and Iran feels like its head is being chopped off, two things will probably happen. They'll send hypersonic missiles to destroy American aircraft carriers, and they can do that. Chinese and Iranian hypersonic missiles can knock out an aircraft carrier like nothing. Easy. Aircraft carriers, the hull of aircraft carriers, first of all, no aircraft carriers alone. They come with a flotilla of 13 ships, plus an AWAC plane that's constantly above to protect it from anything coming in from above. Aircraft carriers are solid hulks. They're solid. The sides of aircraft carriers are essentially impenetrable. They can't sink that way. The top of them are porous. And the inside of them is a giant gas tank. All those planes that are flying, they require enormous quantities of fuel. The whole inside of the aircraft carrier is a gas tank. So all you need is one missile to hit the top. Now they have the AWACS out there trying to defend anything that's coming up from the air, but they can't stop hypersonic missiles, period. And that's what Iran has, and that's what China has. So if Iran is going to get rid of the aircraft carriers, it's not hard. You just send a hypersonic missiles that cannot be stopped by any known American defenses, hit it to the top of the aircraft carrier, and the entire inside burns out and killing everybody inside. Pete Hegseth, the head of the Department of War, has stated on video that all simulations that have been done by the Pentagon on a war with China, should it happen now, would result in the entire United States Navy being defeated within 30 minutes. That's Pete Hegseth saying that on video that you can still see. 30 minutes, the Chinese can wipe out all the aircraft carriers because they have hypersonic missiles. Aircraft carriers and their flotillas are World War II technology. They're not technology of 2026. They're old technology, big hulks. Okay, a submarine can't knock them out with a torpedo. Okay, so what? Get something on the top, the whole thing burns out. So you have that happening. But at the same time, if the Iranians feel fully, like this is it, they're going to activate their sleeper cells. And so you're talking about missiles and other things, weapons being shot in the United States, within the continental United States. You're talking about the continental United States no longer being protected by the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans. You're talking about buildings, missiles, things like that happening here. And the enemies of the United States know that they're never going to get the United States to stop messing with them unless the war hits home, unless it comes in here. And now, because of the Biden-Harris years, I'm not being pro-democratic or anti-democratic or pro-Republican or anti-Republican. I'm not doing that. I'm just saying we had an open border policy during the Biden and Harris years. Because of that, those sleeper cells exist
Mhm.
and their weapons exist. And only an idiot would say that they don't exist, because you'd have to conclude that the Iranians and Al Qaeda and ISIS were some completely numbskulls. They were completely just stupid, and they're not. They're very intelligent people, and they are very tough fighters. So those networks actually do exist. So that's what we should probably be expecting on that side. Now, you asked about how this is all spilling out with regard to the other side. I don't think you can separate that from the chaos that is likely to result on the war side, nor can you separate it from the economic problems that are actually. The US economy is clearly a very high speed train heading directly into a mountain that has no tunnel. It's going to crash. I don't know exactly when it's going to crash, but already countries like Japan, who have economic conditions that are worse than ours, they're selling as fast as they can their American Treasury bonds, getting rid of them. China is trying to pivot out of them as well. Uh, Japan actually wants to try to sell the US Treasury bonds and use the proceeds to help pay off some of their debt. They have huge debt problems. So at some point, it's going to accelerate. And when people start dropping US Treasury bonds and dropping the dollar, the country is going to simply collapse. I mean, the economy is going to collapse. And I don't know when that's going to happen, but it's inevitable. So you have all of these other things happening at the exact same time as the stuff you're asking about. So you can't look at the stuff that you're asking about, which the Epstein files and things like that, in isolation from everything else. So the disclosure stuff that you talked about is the perfect pivot for the powers that be, who are desperate at this time to regain the control of the agenda, the public agenda. So UFOs, yeah, let's talk about now is a good time to talk about the aliens. Yeah, sure. Are they existing? We have more evidence that they're existing. We have a good video for you to see. Look at that. You see, it may be an alien extraterrestrial spaceship. Obama said it, things like that. Now, right after Obama said it, he started to pivot it. He started to backtrack it a couple of days later. He started
Yeah.
to say, and immediately the news sources started to say he was just joking. But he wasn't joking when he did the podcast.
It did seem like it was a planned thing.
It
Like the
was,
just like you mentioned, there was no follow-up question. It seemed like it was scripted, like that was meant to come out as a soundbite and then get everybody riled up.
and whoever did it, whoever got Obama to do it, clearly knew it was going to irritate Trump. And now Trump, it was one way to sort of kick the can on Trump's part so that he'd have to respond and sort of regain the attention. So how much is actually going to come out? One thing you should absolutely know for certain: there are no good guys in this. There are good ETs, they're trying, but in terms of controlling this information, don't look at any leadership and saying, now we're going to tell you the truth. Get ready, folks.
Yeah.
Lick your chops. This is it. This is going to be the big one. We got a movie coming out as well. That's all control. That's all control by powers that be that are trying to regain control of the agenda.
So as a final question, just to wrap up this whole idea. So as we're getting what is being described as disclosure, which is really part of a distraction from other things, even though people may be excited about getting some little nuggets of truth that they've been craving for a long time, what is important for people to keep their eyes on as all of this chaos is unfolding around us?
Actually, the chaos is really important to watch because it's being orchestrated by the good ETs. These are not chaotic events that were invented by the good ETs, but the good ETs have managed to crush them all into one time span, into one moment in time, so that they all happen together. The chaos, the actual events, were actually invented by the bad ETs, but they were supposed to be triggered at distant times to keep the planet in a constant state of turmoil as a means of control. The good ETs took them all and were able to manipulate them so that they all happen at the same time. So watching the crises unfold is actually very, very useful. Meanwhile, watching our projects at farsightprime.com is honestly the only way you will get a truly alternate understanding of what's really going on. And so that is the key. Now, I have a podcast that I come out with, a live stream that I come out with once a week on Sunday evenings, where over the last month I've pivoted that into deep explanations of this entire stuff, all the complexities, like the stuff that we were talking about today. So over the last month, I've really, rather than just sort of talk about things in a sort of superficial way, I'm going deep into explaining things, and it's resonating with the audience. But that is a good way to sort of keep up with the sort of the deeper meaning of what people are experiencing. Yeah.
Well, Dr. Brown, it's always a fascinating conversation with you. I'm really glad that we spoke about this today. It's very current, very important to get this information out there, and I believe a lot of people are going to appreciate it. As usual, I'll have links to all of Farsight's websites and resources in the show notes for this video. Any last words before we wrap it up?
Yeah. Um, a lot of disturbing things are coming out now. Lots more bad things are going to happen, but people should not be discouraged at all. This collapse has to happen in order for something good to come out. People don't understand the depth of which this really is a prison planet. It's not like a metaphor or analogy. It's a literal prison planet run by using very advanced psychological techniques, not bars and cement like in human prisons, but it's a prison planet nonetheless. And that is the goal, to collapse the prison planet and to free everybody. So all of these crises are actually not bad things. They absolutely need to happen in order to free you, to free everybody. So if you want a positive thing to happen, start learning what's really going on. Everything that we're pumping out at farsightprime.com is designed to give that information, like a library of understanding, alternate understanding of the reality that's actually happening. And the bottom line is, this is a fight for survival, a fight for life. And we are right now in the deep crunch time of making this happen. So as you see chaos happening, just understand it's the bad stuff that's collapsing. The Epstein files, it's the corrupt leadership that's collapsing. You know, the things that are collapsing are the things that were rotten to the core from the beginning. What we're trying to do is to bring about a complete change of existence for everyone on this planet, and that's a good thing. And now is the time when that birthing process will happen. And when you give birth, ask any woman who's given birth, it is really chaotic during those painful moments when you're pushing out the baby from your stomach. But what happens afterwards? You've got a little one on your stomach. That's a joy.
Yep, a
This is
beautiful thing.
this is the birthing process.
Well, I'm happy to leave the audience with that message. That's really puts a nice light on it.
Thank you for bringing me on again, Rob.
It's always a pleasure, and I'm sure that we'll have you back soon as things continue to change and unfold. So until next time, take care. Thank you once again for joining us, and thanks everybody for watching. And yeah, see you again next time.